This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode.
All right, and we're back. Daily Leader is back. Hopefully Brad is actually recording both video and audio. That I love to throw Brad under the bus anytime because he always...
Transcript only. This is a transcript only recording.
He takes technology like he's 79 years old at 34 or whatever he is. So, Brad, Daily Leader, I'm super excited. Today's going to be great. We have a very special guest that I've actually known my entire life, which is crazy to say. There's only two people that have known me my entire life, and this is one of them. So with that, I call him Old Man Dan. But most people probably don't call him Old Man Dan, although, yeah, he says, what? But my dad, man, do you want to take a minute and introduce my dad?
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. I do not call him Old Man Dan because he would punch me, but I call him Dr. Jessup, and we'll get into
better respect. I like that.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, indeed.
I'll be talking mostly to you, Brad, today, and not the other Tim.
Fair enough. Well, you're married to Elizabeth. You've been married for 42 years. You've got 3 sons, Taylor, who we have the pleasure of being on with right now, Kevin and Brian. You're with Young Life, and you've been with Young Life for a long time. So you began actually in high school at Santa Barbara. So I'm curious, and I want to revisit that before we hang up here. And attended Pepperdine University, where you met Elizabeth, graduated there with BS in biology in 81. Then went to Princeton Theological Seminary in 84, got your master's in divinity there, and then joined the Young Life staff in 82. So you've been with Young Life for about 42 years here. And during your tenure there, you've not only been an area director, but a regional director of leadership development for Africa, Asia, and Latin America, senior VP for Latin America and the Caribbean, and currently a group VP. And you're serving over several international regions in the season of your time. So, and then what's really cool is you just completed your doctorate, not just, but recently in the last several years from Fuller University with an emphasis in distance leadership. So I'm really excited for us to kind of talk about what that means to you and how, your experience as well as your research kind of gave you all that experience. So I think what would be fun now that I've hit the highlights and the resume is if we actually got to hear you share your story.
Yeah, happy to share my story. It's fun to be on with both of you. Apparently one more fun than the other, but we don't know
who that is. Well, TBD.
No, I actually think we probably do at this point. But no, it's really, I'm very excited to be with you guys. It's a great program that you put together, and I just think it's fantastic. So a little about me. Yeah, born and raised in Southern California, and got involved with the Young Life organization. Those who don't know, it's a Christian faith-based organization for teenagers around the world, dealing with every kind of kid you could possibly meet from every religious background and culture. But I got involved in Southern California in high school, and then I became a believer. So it's a Christian organization talking about Jesus. That's a big part of my life. And then I went off to Pepperdine University, thought I was going to be a medical doctor, and then switched ways, ended up going to Princeton Theological Seminary, coming on the Young Life staff, something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be asking people for money my entire life, and I didn't want to be poor. So I go, nope, I think I'll pass on all of that. I'll do the doctoral thing, and then I'll volunteer. But there were other plans to be had. So I ended up on the Young Life staff and been on it a long, long time, 20 some odd years in the United States, and then 20 plus years around the world. And now I serve at the C-suite level of Young Life with some amazing leaders and supervise everything we do in the former Soviet Union, Europe, Asia, Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean, then some specialty things that we do with Young Life universities and global cities and developing global leaders, a college sponsorship program for young people around the world that both get an education, get mentoring, and get participate with Young Life. So it's a fantastic run. Been in it a long time. Loving every minute of it.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff, Dad. All right, so tell us. It's a great snapshot of who you are. Give me something. I'm going to throw something at you. Give me a quick something that somebody doesn't know about you, like something that they would go. A lot of times people come on our podcast. We have these super high level leaders, but they're actually just human beings that have become that. So what? Tell me some things that people wouldn't know. Sports career, any things that are behind the curtain of Dan Jessup.
Yes, but this kind of if you put this out in public, then you can't use it when you're trying to trick people later on in your life where they
two truths and a lie. Yeah,
two truths and a lie. Yeah, you want to keep that stuff in reserve. But right. I mean, little known things. I did have breakfast with Linda Ronstadt at her house back in the 70s. For those you punks your age, you don't know who that is, but she was a big deal back then, and quite frankly, still is. That's right, Brad. Get over it. But she was, famous performer and whatnot. People would not know that. Let's see. Other things that I had. I spent again. These are older things that you guys will just have to get over. But spent some time with the former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, at his compound in Guanajuato, Mexico. Maybe we'll talk about that in this podcast. That's kind of a big deal. And the last little thing that I fly for a living all around the world, but what most people don't know is I actually have my pilot's license. So just in case the plane is going down and the pilots, are both dead, could I get up in the front and land the plane? No, I could not possibly do that. Nevertheless, I've got my pilot's license and enjoyed that in the formal world.
You're saying a Boeing and a Cessna are not the same thing. Is that what you're saying?
They're basically the same thing, only slightly different. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's good. Yeah, you did also play. You were a two-sport athlete, which doesn't get talked about a lot. You did some water skiing, back at Pepperdine, and played a little volleyball there. Okay,
little competitive work back in the days. Yes, when I was young, nimble, and lighter than I am now.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
It's good stuff. So, all right. So today, there's kind of three main things that you and I actually discussed talking about on the podcast and gone over with Brad. Those three things are the ideas of 32 things you can learn from a bad leader. I will say a long time ago, my college days, we were working through a bunch of things and you gave me an email that was kind of like, hey, whether or not you have the best leader in front of you, there's a lot that you can learn from. So we want to discuss what can you learn from a bad leader, the leadership trait, something that you have really been instrumental in implementing in my life and so many others, and it's the way you've run your ministry and leadership, and distance leadership, which I think was your dissertation there at Fuller. Got all into that. Those are the three main things that we kind of want to hit on today. Before we get into that, we sometimes play this game. It's supposed to be, some hot takes. But it ended up being a slow burn. So this game is supposed to be fast. The way the game goes, we're going to give you two things. We talk a lot about kind of leadership being this tension of two different things. It's not always black and white of you have to do this and you have to do this, right? There's a lot of gray. There's polling ideas, those kind of things. So this game is called slow burn. It's supposed to be fast, but it's not. And we're going to give you two, kind of rock in a hard place. You got to choose one. Choose one and explain, if you had to choose between these two, which one would you choose? And then give us the quick 10-second version, could be 30 seconds, of why. Some people step outside of the box and they say, I'm going to choose both. And we pretend like we're going to do something about it, but we're really not, because we're stuck on a podcast. So you ready for that? You ready to jump in, see how it goes?
I'm glad it's a slow burn and not a quick thing. I'm old, but I'm ready. Let's get it.
All right,
bring it.
Let's go. All right, so pick one and tell us why. Which one do you? is more important, or which one, if you had to choose, being kind of who I am, what I'm doing on the inside, or doing, like actually physically getting up, doing tasks, doing those kind of things? Which one would you choose?
Right now, at this point in my career, probably being, because I don't do there as much as I used to do. So if I'm stuck on myself working about what I do, I could be a miserable human being. So stuff going on the inside tends to drive me a little more now than it used to. But anybody I employ, it's all about doing. Make no mistake. So it's a slight variation.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So push comes to shove. Which one are you going to choose? People or tasks? So people, your team emphasis, people first, or the stuff that they need to get done.
All right. Just to be awkward, I'm a guy in ministry and I should pick people, but I'm going to pick task just for fun. Because a lot of time we're so focused on people and how you do it and nurturing stuff, we don't ever get to the actual work. And so there are times where I wake up and I want to see, you know what, it was the work that we're involved with. And if we're not doing that, then we're probably not going to be around the people that we want to be around for very long. So on this one, I'll take task.
Yeah.
How am I doing?
All
Am I
right.
0 for 2? Is there a score?
There is, but no one ever gets to see the score. So it's kind of like whose line is it anyways, if you ever watch that show. Nobody ever knows what the real point system is. You're currently at negative 37 points, but I won't tell you what the scale is. Yeah. Relationships or results?
I'm going to go with the predictable relationships on this one. So
Right.
when it comes to results are super critical. If you're working for me, or if you're working for anybody who can't produce results, you shouldn't be in that job, because it's miserable for a human being to be in a job that they're not any good at. However, relationships are the one that lasts. And so the things that provide depth in life and core and whatnot, those would be more relational driven things. And you can have those long when you don't work for the same company anymore. It's relationships that you build are pretty vital.
That's good. Okay, how about values or vision?
Yeah, okay. I saw this one on the pre-read and I didn't like it. I'd like to call a party foul on this one, but I'm gonna go with vision. I'm gonna go with casting vision. If you can't cast vision, since this is a leadership podcast, if you don't know how to lift people's eyes to something bigger than the immediate or what's in front of them, you're not much of a leader. You're not going to grow much of a company or ministry. So I'm sticking to vision on that one.
Goodness or greatness?
Stupid question number 2.
It's more negative points, by the way.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm gonna go with goodness. I think greatness is overrated. I think greatness can be one of the greatest impediments in life, because a lot of times people try to be so great they just don't live with good. Sometimes good can be really great when it's just good, and doing the good is a good thing. So that may not be what you meant by goodness, but that's what I'm picking.
Culture or productivity?
Yeah, I'm going to go with, again, if you can't produce, you're not going to be part of the culture. But I do think when it comes to creating things, when it comes to how do you put together something, whether it's a small business, whether it's relational ministry, or whether it's any kind of an organization or your own family, right? If you can't create a culture that people want to be part of, then I think you got to go back to leadership school. And how do you begin to take whatever culture you inherit and then begin to think about, okay, how would I make this something that people want in? They don't want in just for the 401k or want in for the salary, but they want in because you're doing something that is changing people's lives and being super productive.
Recovery or performance?
Well, I'll stick to performance. I got a high rev speed. I mean, I like the RPMs up over at least over 5,000, if not up to six. And even in my elderly age, I still believe that people can perform if what's in front of them is not a good fit for their soul at that particular time. Like, we're all watching the Olympics. So not everybody's going to be running the 100-meter dash, right? But if you can have performance in whatever role that you're in, and a good leader can help people find the right role to perform at any particular stage of their life. So I think I'd line up there.
That's good. Brad, what is his score by the end of the game?
Yeah, am I still on the podcast, or are we done early? I mean,
No, I feel like you're a solid like 4 out of 10 here. I think that,
that would have been a good grade for me in high school. Those were probably my grades right there, 4 out of 10.
I was going to say, in this family, if you got 4 out of 10, not depending on, as long as it's a curve. If you're not grading on a curve, you fail. But
yeah. What did everybody else get? I only got 4 out of 10, but it's fine because everybody else only got 5. That's good. No, I appreciate. That's always kind of a fun one to get us started. So, all right, great. Let's do this. We're going to turn our attention to something else. All right, so here's the interesting thing. We talk on this podcast all the time about good leadership. We talk about what that looks like. What are characteristics? How do you build a good culture? How do you do all that kind of stuff? And the truth is that Brad and I are doing that because there's so much not good leadership out there, right? That's the premise. The premise of the podcast is most people, when they're at their company or wherever they are experiencing what they might call bad leadership. However they define that, which we can talk about what that looks like too. So talk to me, because you changed my perspective a long, long time ago. You helped me see, hey, here's all these things that you could learn if you're not in a place where you're going, hey, my leader is not encouraging me, inspiring me, challenging me, doing all the things that a good leader is. So talk to me about what are things that we can learn from bad leadership.
Yeah. Well, I can remember, when we were going, we've all had leaders that were not particularly helpful in our life, right? And quite frankly, we sometimes we spend so much time trying to find the right scenario. We don't just learn to live and find fullness in whatever scenario we're particularly in. And a lot of that time, that is, we got a lousy leader that's giving us leadership. And we can ditch and whine all we want about the person, but that is where we are. And so I can remember talking to you, Taylor, when you were young about here's a bunch of things you can learn from bad leadership, right? And part of the question is what is a leader? Like, what are they supposed to do? And one way that I might think of describing this is helping others achieve beyond themselves. Some leaders have people around them when what they really want is those people to help the leader achieve. That's not the way I think of leadership. It's an upside down pyramid. It's like I am, as a leader, I'm helping others achieve beyond what they can get. And then we get an exponential win out of it. So that's really comes from my paradigm of what it means to me to think of leadership. Is one way to describe it. So some things you can learn from a crappy leader. One is how to grow up, how to toughen up, how to have a little durability and stamina. We live in a culture where sometimes people are just weak, and it's like, right? Yes. We're used to somebody else making our life okay. Well, that's great when you're 9 or maybe 13, but that doesn't help you much when you get a little bit older, because life is hard, and a good boss, bad boss, life can be pretty hard. So one thing you can learn is how to grow up, right? Another thing you can learn is self-leadership. Like, if you're always waiting for the right scenario before you can excel, well, you're not going to be. I mean, again, going back to the Olympics, you're looking at people, they've got this unbelievable challenge. And if you can't lead yourself and you don't learn self-awareness, who am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And learn to take responsibility for our own behavior and choices in life, be that smart or failure, whatever, So anyway, a bad boss can help you develop leadership pretty well. And to that end, it helps you learn to find what you need to succeed, right? just because if your particular boss can't be a good mentor for you, they'll still be your boss, but then go out and find some other leadership, right, that you want to emulate. It causes you to put more energy into your own world. And a good boss can accelerate you beyond, kind of like a good coach, beyond what you think you can achieve. But if your current boss doesn't have it, you can whine and keep looking on Open Door for a different job, or you can go, no, the best, when I hire people, the best indicator that you're going to be successful in your next job is you were successful in your last job. So if you can't be successful in your current job as a supervisor and a hirer, I probably don't want to hire you, because I want to know that you can rise above the fray as a leader to be able to excel, whatever the environment is.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things as you were talking that you reminded me of is he said something to me once. I'm going to see if I can say it correctly to try and remember it, which is like, hey, I bet that, and this was just pulling stats out of the air, but I think that it's pretty true. I bet that 60% of people who are not happy at their current job will not be happy at their next job, because it has more to do with the person than it does with the job. And I think, we spend so much time in 2024, right? When this is being recorded, we spend all this time trying to chase after our passions and do those kind of things. But if you can't find a way to extract leadership out of a individual, even if you don't perceive they're a good leader, joy out of a job that you don't want, then you're kind of dead in the water, wouldn't you think? Like, isn't that to me is one of the greatest signs of somebody is, hey, whether or not you like your job, right? Are you still able to get results, and are you still able to lead yourself? Those are things that I feel like are very tangible and important. So what would you do to encourage people, hey, I've got a bad leader, or I perceive that I have a bad leader. Like, that's how I feel. What is a good, I'm just going to throw this at you before we move on to some other things. So what's a good, what are some good practical steps to help me lead myself in that place? Like, if Dan Jessup was in that spot and you're like, hey, or go back to the time where you felt that way, what are things that you did to help you get through it?
Well, it's a really good question, Taylor. And, one, it's impressive you remember anything I said growing up, right? As a kid.
You're welcome.
That's just pretty impressive. And especially if it's a good thing. And the bad things you're probably not going to put on the podcast. And so I'm grateful for that. But I know maybe one of the things, if we can be frank, that has shaped me as a leader, that I like to think after being in it 4 decades plus, right, is a spirit of durability. It's the spirit to adapt to whatever environment is, and then excel in whatever environment you're in. And so one of the things that I've done over the last 20, 25 years is I've spent a lot of time with people around the world in some really hard places. And so when you get around a leader in a Nicaragua or a Haiti or a Dominican Republic, or you get around a leader in the Ukraine or Kazakhstan or some of the complicated places in Asia, Bangladesh right now, or Cambodia, or some places that are really, really challenging, and you watch other people where their environment is just absolutely chaotic. At the deepest level, they don't have money, food, security, whatever. I can remember asking one of our key staff in Nicaragua, how do you live here in this chaos? And he turns to me and he goes, it's not chaos, it's normal. Like, that will snap your head around, to stop thinking about the environment's got to change before I change. That's going to make your life miserable. And if you can learn how to lead in the most complicated places, right, then you can go anywhere and find success. Then you're going to be the kind of leader that someone looks to, because then they can plop you into anything, and you're going to be good.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. It is super interesting. We've done this deal. Currently, I'm doing this thing called the movement, which is to help people try and focus on getting exercise, controlling things you can control, being grateful, right? Getting down, getting some sunlight in the morning. And that gratitude piece for me is all about perspective on life. Like, what is your perspective? And I think you talked about that really well. Like, we oftentimes in this country, and you get to work with other countries that are, not all first world places. They've got different challenges than we do, and their perspective is far different. I spend a lot of time in, recovery circles, and I remember going through a particularly hard season in my life. And I sat there, and this gal said something I'll never forget because it pissed me the hell off. She said, God hasn't changed my circumstances, but he has changed my perspective. All I wanted in that moment was for my circumstances to be different. And I think so often we want our circumstances, that we want our leader to be different. We want our job to be different. We want the amount of cash flow I have coming in to be different. We want, whatever. Yeah, Brad's saying, yeah, I know that one. I want everybody's sitting here in 2024 going, what the heck is happening with my cash flow? Like, I want all those things to be different. And yet the only thing I can control is my perspective on that situation. So it sounds like what you're saying, if this is coming back, is, hey, the key to working with somebody that you may not perceive as a good leader, may not feel that they may not be helping you get to where you want to go, is what are you able to get out of that time? Can you shift it so that you can be super productive no matter who the leader is, no matter what the company is, no matter where you are? You lead yourself first, which is, look at all the good things that I've still got going on, even in the midst of whatever else, right? I think that's your staff. You experience that, don't you? Like, you meet with people from Eastern Europe and places that are going through much harder times than us. But the stories that I hear back from you, Dad, are pretty encouraging and inspirational in terms of people's perspective on their situation.
Well, it's the great. I work with the most amazing people around the world. I mean, they genuinely are amazing. And so, I mean, I don't know if I told you this story, Taylor, but Brad, this will be interesting for you and kind of fun maybe for the people listening, right? I gather together every year our 100 top staff. So I got this idea actually from a guy who was good friends with Steve Jobs at Apple and worked for McDonald at Apple. He said Steve Jobs would find their top 100 leaders in the company at Apple, and he'd pour an excessive amount of money, because he said the future of Apple will be in the hands of those top 100 leaders. So this light went on me. It's like, we're going to create that around the world. And so we pull this group of our 100 best leaders, non-American leaders from around the world, and we're pouring a lot of energy into developing their leadership so they can go back and develop leadership in the country that they're from. So I was in London with one of our staff a few months back from the Ukraine. And I won't tell you his name, but he lived in the eastern part of Ukraine where the war is hottest and heaviest. And we're walking around London. He pulls out his phone, and he pulls up an app on his phone. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, this is a map of the Ukraine. And every time a missile is launched, he goes, my phone vibrates. And I pull out and I look at where the missile is landing. My house is right there with my wife and my daughter. And I go, how do you do this? We're walking around London talking about Jesus and getting the kids in your country and changing cultures and education, leadership, and your wife and kids are back home in the middle, right? He goes, this is that important to me. In other words, not allowing the circumstances to dictate the convictions in the core of the soul. So this is the durability. This is the toughen up. This is the grow up a little bit in a culture. We live in a culture that's pretty sweet and kind. And we go through very, very hard things in this culture, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, we can learn a lot about perspective, Taylor, as you say, from other people that were watching live it and going, okay, I want to live that way. I want to live that, because no one can steal your joy in your soul when you have it coming from the inside.
That's powerful. Let's kind of keep teasing this out a little bit, talking about some of the leaders that you've developed as well as the leadership tree. So walk us a little bit through, like, what does that phrase even mean? What is the model, and why has it been so effective at developing a large number of leaders?
Well, it's interesting, Brad. It's a good question, right? When you think of if you were involved in my orbit around the world, you would hear three words used a lot: map, tree, list. It's an operating system that we use to scale Young Life around the world. I mean, a lot of people listening to this podcast may not know about Young Life, which is fair, but we know about 2.4 million kids by name around the world. So that's not a media-driven number of people that are attending your crusade or that are listening to a podcast, as good as that is. Those are actual people where we do know their names and their relationships. Outside the U.S., it's 1.8 million outside the U.S. And so part of the question that I get asked a lot with 39,000 volunteers is, how do you know someone's doing what they're supposed to be doing? Well, when you can only get together, maybe a couple times, maybe once a year, once a month, every 2 or 3, whatever. But how do you know? Well, map tree list is our operating system. It's the way we know. We won't go into map and won't go into to list, but we can talk about the leadership tree. And since I come out of an organization that's a faith-based entity, I couch this conversation in discipleship. But if you're not familiar with the word discipleship, just think leadership development, right? It's the idea that Jesus developed the leadership of 12 other people to take over the company called the church after he was gone. Okay, and so it's pretty good thinking. And in reality, although he had 12, he had 3 that were the closest inner circle. So the leadership tree actually is about having a piece of paper that's a picture of a tree. I have mine. This is a tree. I have no, like, we're going, y'all are in the generation of high tech, right? You can screw up a lot of good leadership when you think everything's got to be high tech. This is low tech. This is paper. You can rip it. See, I mean, it comes and you can fold it up. It's amazing how these things used to work. But the idea is of the tree is that every branch has 3 branches. Again, this is like no duh 101. But when you let it sink into your soul and you think about scaling something, you might just go, there's some brilliance there. I didn't come up with it. So I'm happy to talk about the brilliance of it. I'm just going to use it and figure out a way to scale it around the world to our 39,000 volunteers. But I write my name at the bottom of this trunk, and then above it, every branch has got 3 names. And those are the 3 closest people to me that I'm developing. When I get run over by a llama, okay, when my days are over, when someone says, hey, you did a really good job and you're all done now, right? What do I hand to the net? Well, I'm going to hand you 3 leaders that are fully capable to do my job. That's what I do. Okay, but the real brilliance of it is not the first branch of my 3. It's that every one of those 3 has a branch of 3. And then every one of those 3 has a branch of 3. When you watch the exponential numbers skyrocket fast, right? And so it's leadership it's a way of thinking about developing people. I'm not a believer that certain people are just born a leader because they're an Enneagram number whatever, or a Myers-Briggs profile of this, or, kind of a working genius. All of that stuff's super helpful. But anybody can be a leader and help others achieve beyond themselves, right? And so my job as a leader of leaders is when people come into my orbit, to make sure that I'm identifying leadership. I work with whoever I work with, right? And there's a lot of people I work with that are fabulous that may or may not be on this leadership tree. but that I'm intentionalizing the development of a few other people, and that I'm making sure that they're intentionalizing the development of a few other people. So with that, because our organization is not a company that says, well, come into the company, we'll hire you as a HR specialist, and then we want to get you over to the finance department to learn some things, and then we'll get you into kind of our marketing deal so you learn that part of the company. That's actually not what we do. We've got different people functional that can do those things, but our primary focus is developing people that can raise up an organization in a country with almost no resources around them, and to be able to bring goodness into the lives of teenagers in the most chaotic places. That is a pretty rare air of leadership that can pull that off and do it with integrity. So I don't know, Brad, if that kind of gets you at a little bit. But the nice thing about this, I mean, I'll tell you a little bit more. You fold this thing up, smell this, it folds, Brad, okay? And then I put it in this little thing, that's a journal that I keep, and I put it in my journal, Brad. You watching how this works? This is very complicated, right? And then I put this in my backpack, and when I get off a plane anywhere in the world, there's going to be different people that come up to me and say, Dan, I want to see your leadership tree. And I've got to be able to open up my little deal and sit down with a brother or sister in Vietnam or Hong Kong and say, well, this is how I'm thinking about my leadership training. Can I see yours? And they may be a first-year employee, or they may be a volunteer leader walking the streets, of Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and they're going to pull out their leadership training. So you think of a very simple, touchable, durable way to take simple principles and scale them. That's part of the secret sauce of good global leadership, that others can grab onto it, and then you can do it throughout the organization or the company.
When you think about the effectiveness of this tool, Dan, is there anyone who comes to mind, like somebody who got a hold of this and like took it to a whole nother level that you had never imagined?
Well, yeah, I mean, I could probably list off a bunch of names, but I'll start with Rafa Alejo in the Dominican Republic, maybe one of the very best. So Rafa is this unbelievable, charismatic, smile Dominican that began to think about this. And again, we didn't make up this idea. This is a biblical model of Jesus, who had Jesus and Peter, James, and John, and then the full cadre of, the 12 disciples, and then the 70 or 72, and then okay, so this, it's a big pyramid scheme, right? If you want to think of it that way, but so this is ground into a biblical theological, construct, but Rafa has taken this idea, and if you apply this out over 5 or 10 or 20 years, you can go down and see this trail in this cycle of leadership that has taken our work in the Dominican from a small entity of very wonderful work that started in the late 1999 and then kind of exploded it into this exponential growth of real quality leadership development in the lives of other people. So that would just be one person that I would say, I could name plenty in the United States, I could name plenty around the world, but Rafa would be one where he's taught me how to do it more than I've taught him.
I love that. I love when someone catches a vision and takes it even further than what maybe you originally thought was possible. Something that I'm curious about is so we've got a great working definition of leadership, right? Which is about helping other people achieve more than what they could do on their own, right? Bringing something out of someone that was maybe unexpected, latent potential they didn't even know they had. But give us more to sink our teeth in on the development side. What is development to you? What does it mean to develop someone else?
Yeah. Well, again, going back to the leadership tree and development, I got this idea from our brothers and sisters in Africa. because our Africans that work with Young Life, they weren't satisfied with growing an organization in a particular place in Ethiopia or Tanzania, but they started to dream about the continent. And they solidified this little diagram that our Latins got a hold of that and go, oh, okay, that's a good idea, right? And so to put me too far into the mixture, I'm kind of behind the curtain, trying to make sure that we're actually trying to scale it in a way that makes sense. But I'm learning it from other people, and so that spirit of humility, because an awful lot of strong leaders, they don't want to do anything that wasn't their idea, right? They kind of the not invented here syndrome that a lot of people whine about, but most people live out. They'd much rather be their own idea. That's a truncated form of leadership. But when I think about development, I think about having people around me that I spend enough time with, and I'm in their world as much as they're in mine. Very difficult to build leadership in a boardroom. Okay, you can run a good meeting and you can run business, and it can be super important. But if I'm gonna develop leadership, I've got to be out in their turf. I've got to be in their territory. I've got to be in their country. I've got to be probably in their house and walk the streets with them and see how they live. But the goal is, at the end of the day, I'm trying to help crafting them to think the way I think. So in other words, I'm a GSVP. Okay, that's our type of group senior vice president. And I have SVP, senior vice presidents, that run continents around the world, a continent, okay? With all the banking systems and HR laws of every country's got its own chaos. I mean, these are amazing people that are running this deal. But I want to be in their world. So the SVP, when we're together, I'm talking to them and walking with them about what it is that they do, but I'm also presenting problems and dilemma and challenges that I have. And I say, well, if you were in my shoes, I want you to think, stop thinking as an SVP right now. Now think as a GSVP. It helped me think through this problem, which almost always lifts the head and broadens the peripheral vision. I've never thought about it, because we all tend to lead, and we have to lead within our own geography or venue or department or whatever is our responsibility. But development of people is not just helping them go, hey, you know what? Your production costs are a little bit high and you're spending a lot of money on marketing. You don't have much of an ROI on this. That's all important. But at the end of the day, to those that have capacity, you're wanting to help them figure out how they can grow in their leadership. And quite frankly, think about things a little bit more, maybe that I have to think about, or the way I think about them. And then they can bring their magic of leadership to those ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's super good. One of the things, Dad, that we have talked on here often about is the idea of humility. And you hit on that, right at the beginning of that, of saying, hey, I got to be willing, if I'm a leader, to be in their shoes. And that always sounds really good until you have to do it. Like Brad and I worked Chick-fil-A, our journey there at Chick-fil-A, number of years. And it always sounds really good to say, hey, I won't ask my team to do anything I'm not willing to do myself until it's 110 degrees and I got to go take orders outside or throw away the trash or go deal with a customer that I don't want to deal with, right? I think that is also so important, because if you really want to lead somebody, you just got to be willing to get in the mud with them, like side by side. Like, I'm not better than you. I don't perceive that I'm better than you. I may have a bigger title, but we are both people. And I think valuing people there is just a great indicator for them of going, this is somebody that is trustworthy that I can learn from, and then you invited them into, you inspired them. What you were saying, what I got is, let me inspire you into the person that you could be.
Well, I think that's right, Taylor. And I do, some of our team around the world has the phrase, you got to sweat the shirt. In other words, you gotta walk with me in my barrio, my neighborhood, right? I want to see the shirt not all pressed and looking neat and tidy. I want to see it sweaty, and I want to
Yeah.
see mud on your boots, right? And that the phrase of leadership that goes with that, when you're talking about humility, is a phrase that has shaped me both from my own failure to do it and sometimes my success. Is a servant can go anywhere. If you show up and you want to be recognized as, oh, you're the person in charge, right? That's fine, and we all like to be recognized, right? And that's good. Tom Brady shows up somewhere. He wants people to probably know who he is, and that's cool,
Brad doesn't.
right? He plays football, American Football League. Brad, do you know? I don't know if you know Tom. We just don't like the teams anyway. But the idea of being a servant or having a humble spirit and being willing to go outside in 110 degrees and take orders, right, or do anything, it's not always possible, but it's an internal posture, right? It's how we see ourselves in the mirror and what we're willing. Because if we don't do that, I'll tell you, one of the things I know most is if you don't have a spirit of humility, you'll be a horrible listener.
Yes.
You cannot listen to other people unless you're willing to shut your mouth, think for a second, and listen, right? And usually we have this fear of, I want to control the situation, right? And that doesn't allow us to listen, because then we're always thinking about the next thing we need to say as soon as that person stops talking, right? But you can tell someone that's got a little bit of a leg up on humility is they're willing to listen, right? And to really engage and ask the second and third question and not quickly move on. That's a posture that draws people in versus it's just simply a performance deal that I'm only as good as what I can produce.
That's good.
No, that is. This is, Stephen Covey say you got to, always seek to understand before seeking to be understood, right? And again, most of these things that you said, Dad, not to say that you're not, grandiose and have all these, great ideas, but they're not. Look, we're always looking for the next best thing to get us somewhere, right? We're always looking for the hot topic or the great idea or whatever it is. We talked about this with Chad Brown on our podcast just this last week. But the truth is, a lot of these things are really simple. They're just not easy. The leadership tree is pretty simple. If you look at your company, I don't know where your company is and how many people you employ right now. Your company, your nonprofit, okay? You have 100 people. And if you were expected to develop all those people, you can't do it. But if you were to develop 3, right, really well and say, hey, I want you 3 to now go take other things that I'm giving you and develop other people, all of a sudden, those 100 people, that becomes very manageable. If you want to be a good leader, you literally just said, hey, one of the best keys to that is just listen. Shut up and listen. It's something that you tried to tell me a lot as a kid that I still don't get. My wife says that all the time.
Yeah,
but I think that
that wouldn't be your classic strong suit necessarily growing up. But you've gotten a lot better at it, as I have. It's good.
Which is to your point, is I was not a listener. I get uncomfortable, and when I'm uncomfortable, I talk. That's my safety net, right? And the truth is, can we just shut up? Can we listen? Can we be with people in the trenches? And can we encourage and inspire them to be better than they think that they could be on their own? We can do that together. The old African proverb, alone we go fast, together we go far. Can we do that? So I love all of that because I think it's a great framework for like, hey, you don't need a 15-point system, right, to develop your team. You don't need to go hire somebody and spend, $100,000, although hire Brad and I to come in and do it. But you don't have to do that, right? You don't have to do that. These things are actually really simple and easy, and you can start them tomorrow if you're just intentional. So in that vein, you have to do this all over the world, right? You're doing this like a lot of us, we run companies or work for people, and we're here in, local in the States. But Zoom is a thing, and even my team is all over the valley, and we don't get together all the time. We're all over the valley here in Phoenix. Talk to us about kind of how you would define, I know you did a lot of this at Fuller, but distance leadership and what it looks like to lead in distance leadership. So you probably had to define that for our listeners because they may or may not have heard of that. And then, but I think a lot of this plays into that. So what is distance leadership? And then how do you encourage people to do that well?
Yeah. Well, okay. So distance leadership, two words that are important: proximal and non-proximal. Proximal leadership is primarily the way most people teach people about leadership. Right? I don't know how many leadership books are on Amazon. There's some 50,000, whatever. I do know. Who knows? Right? The challenge with leadership is not often about information. Okay, a lot of us got the information. We read the books. We know the latest stuff. I've read Traction. I've read Stephen Covey. I've read Right. They're all, there's a lot of, and they can be helpful. The challenge as a leader is really about execution. How do I actually execute a few things? Do I have operating principles that are scalable and work? And do I actually live them out? Because if I'm going for the latest fad, we're screwed. So you guys in your business development, right, in your coaching and consulting, you're not trying to come up with the wildest idea. The idea of the leadership tree is so freaking simple. The wonder is in the simplicity and in the scalability of the execution, right? I can remember I told you about Vicente Fox, former president of Mexico, and I was with him a number of years ago, right? He's still an amazing, I think he's still alive, an amazing leader, very well respected. And we were talking about getting Young Life going in Mexico. And he was learning about Young Life. And he goes, I will get Young Life in every school in the entire country of Mexico. I have those. He goes, and we'll get your curriculum being taught in every school. And I said, El Presidente, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. What Young Life is about is really not about information. It's about transformation. We're trying to actually get inside a kid's life and help transform from the inside out. His eyes got wide. And he goes, well, how in the world do you do that? Right? Okay, so that becomes the magic of a leader, a business leader in the life of an employee or a volunteer or a student, right? To walk and spend enough time together. So distance leadership, it's almost all taught with proximity in mind. You have an office. You have people in the office, they have a cubicle, you have a non-cubicle, you have where we work, and whatever, and you have access to other people on a real-time basis. And a lot of companies are set up that way. But now in the age of people that work from home that don't always come to the office, distal or non-proximal means you don't have proximity to them, either because you work in Tempe and they work in Gilbert or Scottsdale, right? So, and then when you run a global entity like I do, the distances of separation and therefore the cost of getting together is exponential. So then how do you think about shrinking that distance through some disciplines and activity that help bring an opportunity for an organization like the one that I run, 110 countries around the world, to actually keep moving in the same direction? I'll give you a few words that are worth chewing on, right? Alignment, simplicity, clarity, joy, and courage. Okay? Alignment, simplicity, clarity, joy, and courage. The joy and courage are critical. Because if you're going to do the work that we do and you don't have joy in your soul, then I'm not sure I want you involved in our work. And if you don't have courage, you would never be dumb enough to enter into what we're doing, because it's ridiculous, right? And so those are culture shaping. Those are culture shaping. It's a spirit of the human being, right? The alignment, simplicity, and clarity are critical. Because if you're trying to execute something that's super complicated, be that the latest business idea, that's got all kinds of complexity to it. That may work in a unified culture. But when you're crossing cultural and language barriers and economic disparity, all that goes with that, the complexity is not your friend. And so you have to clarify what it is that we're doing, and you have to simplify processes in how you operate, what's your operating system, right? So it's got to be simplified to be able to actually be scalable. You can have a big grandiose idea, but this is why they always talk about your elevator speech. You better be able to talk to me about your company and your vision between floor 1 and floor 3. And if you can't clarify it between floor 1 and floor 3, you need to go back to work on your vision statement, right? Mm. And so those are two things that are critical. But at the end of the day, your team is alignment. Is my innermost team in alignment with me and where we believe this company, this organization needs to go, right? And so I've talked at different times about 0 degrees of separation, right? We will battle out the smallest of things to make sure that which seem kind of irrelevant. And in some ways they might be, but they're attitudinal shifts that if you get 2 or 3 degrees off and you put that over time, you're in a different zip code or a different state, let alone not in alignment with the mission of the corporation or startup or, in my case, a ministry organization. So trying to, as a leader, have it woven inside of me. Yeah, these are the words that matter to me. And then you talk about them all the time. All the time. And that other people are talking about them all the time. And so that helps us begin to breed a little bit of a healthier alignment, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It does. I love that. Could you give us 1 or 2 practical to-dos if someone is listening to this podcast, they're in a role similar to yours? Like, I want to know if they want to start practicing healthy distance leadership, and they're currently not. They're using an old proximal model for a distance leadership scenario. What is number 1, number 2 thing you have to start doing differently if you want to make the transition to an appropriate type of leadership for distance?
Yeah, well, the number 1 thing you got to do is pull your top 4 or 5 people together and spend an exorbitant amount of time with them. Okay, and do it, especially if you're talking about a global corporation. The more time you spend with bringing people to America, that's worth a 2 on a scale of 1 to 100. And if you take your Americans and you get them in somebody else's country, that's worth about a 45 on 1 to 100, right? And so it's not equal use of time. So for me, if I'm just practically speaking, bite the bullet, spend the money, get people together for 4 days or 5, do the work together, and then talk about it together. And that's where we go back to your slow burn of do we have alignment with our values? Do we have alignment with our culture? Do we have alignment with the expectations, the flow of money in the movement of personnel or HR processes? Is this team aligned and working together, or do we have more work we have to do? So that, I think, Brad, that would be, I think the problem with thinking that way is it's super expensive. Because if you're in a global entity, each one of those plane flights is $3,000. And if you got a team of 5, you do the math pretty quick, you're burning 20 grand or 30 grand just to pull the team together, right? Yep. And if you're in an organization like mine where resources don't grow on trees and we're all allocating scarce resources, then you have to really believe that time is going to be super valuable. And then when you're together, only do together what you can do together, and don't waste time doing dumb things that you can accomplish on Zoom, or you can accomplish on an email, or you can accomplish other ways. Right? I see so many people bringing their top leadership together. Well, we're going to have someone teach us about this and about that. Do that in a Zoom training, right? So figure out what it is that we can only do together that's really going to create that secret sauce for the alignment of this team, and then do that.
I like that. The picture I got. Have you both seen Remember the Titans? Yeah, you guys. Yeah. Okay. All right. Strong side, left side. The picture that I got was training camp with coach.
Yeah.
That you're talking about, which is, okay, here's the deal. We are all going into camp, and we are not leaving this camp until we are aligned. Blood, sweat, tears, whatever it is. And I think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong here. The same thing that would work, for you guys international, it doesn't matter where your team is, because the chances our teams are fragmented in 2024. But that principle of, hey, can we lock ourselves in a room, in a compound, go to a nice Airbnb in Scottsdale if you want, lock ourselves in and go, can we not leave here till we're aligned? And can we make sure that we're not spending time on dumb crap right now that we could do other times, like, hey, planning out the onesie-twosie tasks? But, like, can we actually get on mission together? Because as most people know, that story comes out and they go, hey, they went from totally fragmented to clear, straightforward, we're going to accomplish this.
No, I think that's spot on, son. This is where sports can be a really good analogy, right, to an awful lot of business acumen and growth, because you can see it on a microcosm level with sports that then, depending on the size of your business, you have to scale. But remember, the Titans is beautiful. They were not on the same page, right? And so a good coach has got to figure out how do you, in other words, to use a phrase or the word I just used, they weren't in alignment. They had no alignment together. Their culture was pathetic. It was this side against this side. It was white against black. It was culture against culture. And you have this dissonance. That doesn't matter how good talent is, right? I don't know if you guys have read this book. This is a fun book that I just read. This is Legacy. Yeah, I had not heard about it, but it's what the All Blacks can teach us about the business of life. So this is about the All Blacks New Zealand rugby team, named All Black, not because they were all black, but because they wore all black, right? And they became this powerhouse. They took this broken culture that wanted to win. And the same thing we're talking about. How do you reshape a culture? Remember the Titans. And this can happen within your, confined business in Tempe, or Phoenix, or a distal, non-proximal leadership around the world, to your point, Taylor, right? Getting alignment is so much work, right? And alignment and no arguing are almost never connected, right? And alignment and peace is probably a non-starter. Alignment, and it just, because you're trying to get at something deeper in your business to where people are actually able to understand how the company or the business works and move in that direction together, and not backbite, and not be able to, right? This one's not about hiring talent. This one's about hiring culture or character. Okay. My business, it's all about, no amount of training makes up for a bad hire. You can't train a bad hire. You can sustain a bad hire, but you're never going to be able to elevate probably their leadership beyond themselves much if they're not a good fit for what you hired them to do. That's not on them. That's on you, right? I didn't do my job when I hired that person.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. I think that those are probably the two things, you just kind of said it. The two things that I think that keep most businesses away from that. One, conflict. We don't want to enter into that conflict. Conflict is scary. We avoid it. We're Americans. We're also very good at that. I'm sure people are better than me. Number two is we have to get out of the actual tasks of the business what's happening day to day, and all the things that distract us to actually get to the mission. I think that those are two really common things that I see, that if you go, hey, is this team aligned? You go, have they had the conflict, and have they gotten clear on the mission? Have they gotten clear on the vision and where they're actually going? Most of the time, I think most companies would say, no, we're not aligned on our why. We may know, right, our how we do what we do. We may know what it is that we do, but we don't know the why. We haven't done the hard work to get there. So, yeah, that's as that framework. I think if people were to take that into Zoom meetings, into all the things, alignment, simplicity, joy, courage, and clarity, right? If you took those and you said, hey, are my Zoom meetings, are we in alignment? Are we keeping it simple? Are we clear? Do we have joy? Is it enjoyable? And can we be courageous enough to say the things that we don't want to say? That might be transformational for your business as a takeaway just for today. Like if you started doing that in your meetings, going, hey, let's process it through this lens, man, that could be good. So, Brad, I know we're kind of coming up on time here. What am I leaving up as we're wrapping up here today? This has been pretty fun.
This is awesome. I'd like to kind of finish off with maybe just a few key observations about what you think leaders in the U.S. need to learn and understand from the types of leadership that you're seeing internationally around the globe.
So good.
I think one thing that I know you would say just relates to what you've already shared, which is this idea of durability, that there's probably certain types or certain areas of weakness or brittleness in the leadership in the U.S. just because we're spoiled we've got a great economy. There's an abundance of wealth. There's some comforts here in the U.S. that make leading very comfortable and cozy. So in addition to that idea of durability and just leadership strength, what would you say are some other important principles that we're just not embodying? Maybe we just don't understand here stateside.
Well, that's a really good and complicated question, right? Because it depends so much of the context of your leadership. I mean, in our country, we have so many opportunities. Competition is extremely high to get a job because of the plethora of people vying for jobs and jobs out there and nuances and whatnot. You get other cultures around the world and the competition is so high because there aren't very many jobs, right? So it's the same coin, the different side of the same coin. But America, one of the things that I believe to be true about our culture is we're an extremely innovative culture. We're thinking on a creative level all the time. How do we fix? I mean, I take an awful lot of people around the world because I do fundraising. That's what I do for a living. So I'm taking people and you get a bunch of type A, men that have been very successful in in their business in the U.S. and you get them on a plane, you land in Managua. They're trying to fix the Managua, Nicaraguan government before they ever get through customs. They go, well, this is their problem, and this is their problem. It's like, I got an idea, fellas. Why don't you shut up and just enjoy the experience and maybe critique it later after you learn something, right? We're innovative people. We're problem solving as the very core of our culture, and that's good. And it's the durability thing that I've learned from our staff around the world. And the courage, the joy and the courage in circumstances that are very difficult, that's an inner spirit, right? And so I think if your listeners and people in business in our American culture can figure out what it is that's robbing their joy, right? Is it a greater purpose? My business is the purpose. I believe that there's a spiritual component, a God came to this earth in Jesus that walked the earth that can give you life beyond your wildest dreams, not problem free, but a life that's not contained to the circumstances of their work. Well, that creates an inner something inside of you that begins to sprout, right? And sometimes I feel like in our culture, we kind of lack that inner drive. We replace it with wanting to be successful or wanting to be known or wanting to be liked or wanting to be okay, right? And a lot of those things are a luxury we have in our country and culture that other countries and cultures may or may not have. But I would want that for people, because then that gets back to the durability. You can put me anywhere, right? And I'll figure out a way to flourish in the deepest, darkest of times in my life. Because for all of us, the crap is going to hit the fan. And our marriage is going to fall apart, or our kids are going to fall apart, or we're going to fall apart, or our morality is going to fall apart, or money's going to fall. Right? That's pretty much called life, right? And if we don't have that inner kind of tether to us to be able to handle the storm and complexities, then we're tend to going to be a little bit more miserable than maybe we could be.
That's great. That's super
Dan,
good.
thank you. That was awesome. This has been so fun.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I'm going to go draw my tree.
Dude, draw your tree.
Yeah.
Send it to me.
Get the pen and paper. Yeah. Pen and paper. Let's go. I'm
going to use a stylus on my iPad. Okay.
Of course you will. Of course you will.
I'll still draw it.
If people want to find Young Life, they're like, man, I heard this guy talk. Cool. I want to go to a bunch of countries and see what's going on. How do they do that? They look you up on LinkedIn. What's the best way to get to you? We'll put all of that in our show notes, but we just always like to highlight that.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't ever look at it, right? I mean, if you want to find out more about the organization of Young Life, right, you can get on younglife.org and find out all the information, and you can get my mailing address, or send me a text, or send me an email or whatnot, and I can hook you up to the right people around the world, right? You're not going to see an awful lot of advertisements for what we do. We sort of want to be the organization that's not on we're not a billboard driven deal, right? We'd rather fly below the radar screen a little bit and walk our talk more than just marking it up. So
that's great. That's perfect.
Yep.
Good. Yeah, you ran a second place in terms of just totally giving people, your email address and phone number. Shane Kuiper, who was on the podcast, and he was ready to give people his address. He's like, yeah, I don't really do the phone much. I'll just give people my address, which we did not do. But
yeah,
thoughtful.
That may not be all that helpful.
He's like, they can just come on by the house if they need to talk, or just swing by.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no worries. Like, you don't know who's listening to our podcast, and nor do we, and they might show up. Well, thank you for joining us. Like I said, man, this has been a great episode, Brad, of the Daily Leader. Yep, so much fun, and we'll probably have you back. You're not too far away, so be great. So
love it.
Like,
thank you, gentlemen.
Subscribe, comment, share.
Yeah,
get the Daily Leader tattoo.
Get it. Get all of that. So with that, we will be back next week.